If you enjoy our podcast, please like and subscribe and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us bring you more content like this. You can find this episode and all of our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. See the show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading news.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of Rounding Up the Roundhouse, the Journal's podcast on the legislative session. I am Dan Boyd, and I am joined today by the Journal's editor-in-chief, Jay Newton-Small. Jay, thanks for taking some time to chat with me this morning.
Dan, thank you so much for doing this. You've definitely, both in spirit, since I'm not up there that often, but also when I am up there, have been an incredible Sherpa for me to sort of help me guide and understand what's going on in the legislature. It's so complicated, and it's been like an amazing experience just to hear and get your wisdom and hear what you think and see what you see. And so I'm excited to be able to be on this podcast with you today so you can help also impart some of that wisdom to our readers and listeners.
Well, I will do my best. I've found that even after all these years at the Roundhouse, I'm still learning new things and still picking up on new things. So it is kind of its own world. But we are here. We're in the second half of the session. Only 10 days left of the 30-day session, which has been going by really fast. But in legislative time, 10 days is still a long time, and a lot can still happen. There's still a lot of important bills that are kind of in limbo. We've reported this weekend on a gun bill passing the Senate, which is very controversial. There's a climate change bill that we're expecting to see action on in the Senate soon as well. Medical malpractice is a big issue, and that's still kind of undecided whether or not they're going to be able to reach some kind of a deal on that. So those are a few of the big bills that we're keeping an eye on, but a lot of other things as well. So that's a little bit where things stand, is we're kind of maybe not quite entering the home stretch, but at least seeing the home stretch approaching.
So I'm curious to know on a few things. We some of the big issues have been around healthcare. The compacts they've passed, I believe, the doctors' compacts. Did they also pass the social workers' compact?
They did. So they've
Okay.
passed those two compacts, and there's still other compact bills that haven't been across the finish line yet.
And so what are the odds of those going through, do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I know Senator Peter Wirth, the majority leader, kind of said going in that he really wanted to focus on those two, and that some of these other ones he thought maybe needed a little more work and to kind of fine tune some of those. So that said, I think there's a lot of advocates who are still pushing, saying that we should pass these other compacts as well. And for folks who haven't paid attention, these are ones dealing with occupational therapists, physical therapists, dentists. There's a whole range of different medical kind of professionals who would be covered by these compacts. But as of now, only the ones with physicians and then social workers have made it to the governor's desk.
It's interesting, on the editorial pages of the Journal, we've had all kinds of op-eds in support of these compacts, mostly from professional institutions. The dentists were the only ones, and it's coming out this week, who've come out against the compacts as a professional group, saying that it would hurt them here in New Mexico. Everybody else really wants to see them passed and want them passed right away. So I'm actually curious to read this op-ed. I think it's coming out into tomorrow's paper about why the dentists oppose the compact in New Mexico.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that too. I hadn't heard that. So.
And then what about medical malpractice? That's been another big issue here. The governor said if they do not pass something dealing with medical med-mal, that she would not hesitate to call them back into another special session, since this is her last session as governor. Do you think they're actually going to get something done on med-mal?
Yeah, I think that's a big one, kind of the cloud hanging over the Roundhouse a little bit. I think a lot of the legislators are aware of the governor's stance, and that she's gotten a little more aggressive on this issue. It was interesting. There was a press conference last week, and Senator Wirth said he thought they were 90% of the way there on med-mal and finding a deal. And the governor said, well, maybe 90% is a little overly optimistic. I think so. So I don't know. I think there is the bill sponsored by Representative Chandler that does seem to have some bipartisan support, but there were some negotiations between hospital folks and the trial lawyers, and those negotiations broke down. So as of right now, there's not a deal, and trying to it seems like this issue of the punitive damages and whether or not there should be a cap on these damages has been the big one, trying to resolve who should be covered by that or how high that cap should be. So I've learned not to make too many predictions at the Roundhouse. I still think that there is a lot of pressure to get something done, but what that looks like, I think really remains to be seen.
So one of the things that we thought might have been a big issue coming into this, but seems to have not been, has been juvenile crime. Has there been any mention whatsoever about juvenile, any bills addressing juvenile crime?
There have been some bills, but they really haven't gotten a lot of traction, kind of similar to last year. It seems like the legislature's in this place where a good faction wants kind of more accountability, stiffer penalties for juvenile offenders, and then there's a lot of legislators who really want to focus more on the preventative side and kind of rehabilitation, and they haven't been able to kind of find a happy balance, kind of addressing both of those issues. So where things stand now, it doesn't look like any bills dealing with juvenile justice are going to make it through. There was one I think that was tabled in a House committee last week that was more on the kind of the punishment side, and so never say never. But as of this point, it just seems like they're kind of at a log jam, so to speak, on that issue.
Seeing what other issues are popping where you think things might get done.
Yeah, I think this gun bill has already advanced further than I expected. Frankly, there was some question about whether or not
And this
banning
bill,
certain.
just to back up, is a ban on assault weapons.
It's a ban on assault weapons is one big part of it. It would also tighten some kind of regulations on licensed firearm dealers as far as kind of uh, tracking their inventory and things like that. But I think it's the assault weapon ban that's gotten the most attention and the most controversy. A lot of folks really think that wouldn't stand up if it's challenged in court, and it probably would be challenged in court. We saw a bill passed just 2 years ago about a 7-day waiting period, and that bill's already kind of at least preliminarily been struck down by the courts and kind of in limbo now. So I was surprised actually to see that got out of the Senate this weekend on a narrow 21-17 vote and is now going to the House. So I'll be really curious to see, if it gets traction there or if maybe some parts of that bill maybe get stripped out going forward.
Anything else that you see that might pass before in the next, what is it, week and a half that we have left?
I mean, obviously the budget still has to be passed. The House has passed it, but the Senate is kind of making some changes to it. Universal childcare is, something we've talked a lot about, and I know you've written some about, and I've written a number of stories about as well. It sounds like the legislators are kind of warming up to that idea of universal childcare with some kind of guardrails. There's a bill that moved forward last week that would kind of implement copays if the economy kind of went south a little bit, and some other things like that. So, and it sounds like the governor's office is on board with that, and so that's one that's looking dicey going into the session. Now it looks like they will at least kind of set up the foundation for universal childcare going forward, and then the question would be kind of funding on a yearly basis and if enough money is put into it.
I'm so curious because when I was up there last week, people, the legislators that I spoke to, who were talking about universal childcare, really felt that the governor, it was more style than substance, right? Like they were just pissed that she'd done it by herself, that they didn't get any credit, that they weren't consulted ahead of time. Has she spent a lot of time kind of smoothing over those ruffled feathers in order to get this through?
I think so, and I think that yeah, that's a good point. I think we did hear that in some of the committee hearings going into the session. That this was announced and got a lot of national fanfare without. And then she kind of came to the legislature and said, "Oh, by the way, now we need you to fund this program that we've announced." And so I think there has been some behind the scenes meetings, and it seems like some legislators, Senator George Munoz, who's the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, is one of the sponsors of this bill, kind of codifying now universal child care. So, and he had been among those who had kind of had some sharp words before about the cost of the program and kind of how it was rolled out. So I think that maybe still there to a degree, but I think there has been, smoothing things over a little bit, maybe, due to some closed door meetings or who knows exactly what's gone on. But I think that has been addressed at least a little bit. And I think the governor's really made it clear that this is a priority of hers. She gave a speech in the rotunda talking about some other funding things she'd like, but really said that her priority this session is the universal child care, and that's the one that she's really going to go to bat for in her final regular session as governor.
Was one of the things that struck me going up there last week, and I think just seeing a lot of the photos that come out of these sessions, is that almost every day seems to be some sort of theme day, which definitely is different than Congress, on the federal level, where, you have kids coming in. I was there for Youth Day. There's like Indigenous Day, which was last Friday. Is there any kind of fun days coming up this week that we should keep an eye out for?
Yeah, I mean, I think every day is some different kind of activities in the Roundhouse. There's school groups here every day. I mean, it's pretty wild as someone who works in the building year round. And usually it's pretty quiet. And then during the session, it's just packed. I mean, it feels like it's the social place to be in New Mexico, during these 30 days. So I'll need to research what some of the theme days are for this week. As you said, it was American Indian Day on Friday, which had some really speeches from tribal leaders, some really cool dancing. It's also been Santa Fe Day. I know it was West Side Day for Albuquerque last week also. So um, I mean, and I think those are fun, and I think they're important to kind of reflect some of the culture of New Mexico. I think there is sometimes a balancing act of how much time should legislators really be spending on some of these things when there's also important, bills to be passed. And so I've known talking with leadership that they think it's important those things be included, but not take up too much time. So that's kind of an interesting balancing act to be watching sometimes too. But I think it is a way that helps kind of, especially on these really heated bills where tempers or tensions kind of run high, and sometimes helps kind of bring everyone back together a little bit again to something that makes all New Mexicans come together watching some of these dances and these performances and things like that.
One of the legislators I met last week was she's a very, very young legislator, and she's championing a bill that would make this a professional job versus making it a part-time thing. That she believes that we're, I think, one of the very few states where it isn't a professional job. It isn't paid sort of gig, and really they do this as volunteers, and they spend a lot of their time doing it. But it means that you have to be wealthy enough to do this as a volunteer, and have a flexible enough career where you could also do it, unlike teachers or doctors, for example, which would be very hard to pull away for months on end from your career. That bill, though, has been before the legislator a number of times. Do you think it has any hope of passing at some point?
Yeah, I mean, this is an issue we've heard more and more about in recent years, and this kind of push to modernize the legislature. There is a proposal this year. I think it's Representative Christina Parajon who's involved with
That's,
it,
yeah,
and
who I met. Yeah.
yeah, and it would have to go. Even if the legislature approves it, it would have to go to voters as well. But we are currently the only state that does not pay legislators a salary. They get a per diem payment that kind of covers their meals and their lodging, but not a salary. This year I think it would probably still be a long shot for it to pass, but I do think it's an issue that at some point I would expect it'll happen. I don't know when that will be, but already, there've been, we've seen a little bit, there's more webcasting now. Legislators have staff, year round, which didn't used to be the case. So we've seen some movement that way. I think the question would be then if you pay legislators a salary, there's also proposals to extend the session lengths. And do you go, 60 days every year or even to 90 days like some states do? And I think there is kind of a sentiment that 30 days is pretty short to be trying to get a lot of these important bills passed. So, but I do think there's a number of legislators, especially some younger legislators and more female legislators now who really think that, like you said, I mean, to really get a true cross section of New Mexicans able to serve in the legislature, that at least some sort of salary, should be paid, and so they can kind of cover those expenses and afford to take time off of their day jobs.
Yeah. So the last question I have for you, it'll be interesting to see if that does pass eventually. Um, the governors, the governor candidates. So obviously we know this is Michelle Lujan Grisham's last year in office. We have an election year to pick her replacement coming up. She's term limited out. There's a bunch of candidates who've already declared, and we've seen, and you written it last week, I think, about those who've made it, thus far onto the ballot. Although I think we have to still collect signatures and do the whole thing. Have you seen a lot of the candidates up there, and what are they saying?
Yeah, we have. It's been interesting, especially. I mean, Deb Holland has been here quite a bit. Sam Bregman has been here quite a bit as well. Deb Holland has spoken at a few rallies and she's attended a few protests, things like that. Sam Bregman has also attended some of these events, and also in his kind of day job as district attorney, he's been here for a few bills in that capacity. But one of the Republican candidates is Steve Lanier, who is a state senator, so he's here every day. But I have spoke some to Deb Holland and to Sam Bregman a little bit about. It's clear that they're tracking these bills, and I think the interesting thing is, whoever is elected governor in November will kind of inherit a lot of these laws that are being debated right now and passed. So I think it's probably smart for all these candidates to be at least watching and being involved closely because, yeah, 10 months from now, 11 months from now, we will have a new governor. And so even though Governor Lujan Grisham right now is kind of calling the shots or really pushing for her priorities, it'll be a new governor kind of implementing a lot of these laws and seeing how they're really enforced over time.
Anything else that I'm missing here?
I think that covers a lot. I mean, for anyone who has been at a session knows kind of the last week is when a lot of the sausage is made, so to speak. We're expecting also a capital outlay bill should be rolled out in the coming days. So really expecting some later nights, some long days, and kind of as they push toward the finish line, which is a week from Thursday. So yeah, I'll be here, long hours, lots of coffee, hopefully to help get through it and all that. But I appreciate you joining me on the podcast today and kind of going over that. And hopefully you'll get a chance to come up here and experience more of the legislature as well.
Yeah, my plan is to come up actually next Wednesday, so
Oh,
pencil me
great.
in and I can help you cover something.
That'd be great. Everyone will be nice and sleep deprived by then. So, um, but we really appreciate everyone watching these podcasts, and my colleagues have some great podcasts as well at abqjournal.com. We'll be, posting all our latest coverage on the website and also in the paper. And I know, Jay, that we've made some changes recently to the website and to the apps, and hopefully that makes it easier for people to find some of these stories and the podcasts and some of our kind of multimedia coverage as well.
Yeah, we have a great live blog going, so everybody should read it. We have a legislative page. It's a tab on our website. Just go to that tab, and it's right at the top of it, and you can sort of see like all the different activities, things that are happening, different committee hearings that we might be covering, folks who are up there, our reporters who are up there or monitoring hearings from here, and obviously all the great work that Dan does and the incredible photos that our photographer up there, Eddie Moore, does. And so I encourage everyone to check it out.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for everyone for listening, and we'll be back with another episode later this week.